Hello, I'm going to talk today about a common challenge in drawing. It comes up with me all the time and I'm sure it does with you too, and it's perspective. So what I'll do is talk a little bit about it first and then demonstrate and try and explain my drawing process. And then I will set you a challenge to observe and draw a rectangular object yourself, which could be a book or a table or a box or something of that nature. Let's start off by looking at this book. Shape of the book. When I pick it up, it immediately comes to portrait format. It's a rectangle. A lot I know about it is from picking it up and looking at it. But when I consider it for drawing, there are other things to think about, which are the way the shape appears to change depending on what angle you look at it from. So when we look at it facing onto the camera, you can see it's a rectangle. You can see the corners are right angles. It's longer in this dimension than it is in that dimension. But let's just, if I just tilt it towards the camera, you can see a number of things appear to change. You can see that the height of the book appears to have become shorter. And the further away I tip it away from the camera, the shorter that height seems to have become, which of course is what we call foreshortening. Let's go back the other way, restore it to its full height. Okay. The bottom edge of the book that's coming out towards you appears to get bigger. The top edge, which is going further away from you, is appearing to get smaller, and therefore the two lines which join up at the corners appear to converge together the further away they get. All right, quite a familiar aspect of perspective. There are other things that are changing here which I think are useful to be able to observe. If you learn to observe these things while drawing, you will probably learn to see them as well. Often our brains know too much about a subject and we'll start saying, oh, you know, drawing a rectangle, it's got right-angled corners, so draw the shape with right-angled corners. But watch those right angles now. As this leading edge comes towards you, what happens to this right angle? And what happens to this? These two and these two change from right angles to these nearer ones are more closed than a right angle. These ones are more open than a right angle. Yeah, do you see that? Now what happens if I point a corner of the book towards you? Not quite the same, is it? These two angles are now different from each other. This one is the one that's more closed than a right angle. That one is the one that's more open than a right angle. Of course, don't take my word for it. You test it yourself and have a look. And it's very much easier to see when you see it on the video. And even easier than that if you take a photograph of your subject. But when you've done that, when you've done a bit of looking with a camera, then look with your eyes. Turn off the camera, stop looking at the photograph, and put your rectangle, your box, your book, whatever it is you've chosen to look at, put it down on the table. Look at the object, look at the object you've chosen to draw rather than at the photograph. And closing one eye gives you the same view as you get with the camera, of course, because a camera is only taking a view from one point of view, not from two. That's sometimes why I think where there's so much information going into the brain, because you're looking with binocular vision, that you're not able to analyse those shapes quite clearly. So that's why I often close one eye, so that the simplification of the view into a flat version of the world, if you like, to a two-dimensional version of the world instead of a three-dimensional version. Helps you to analyse what you're looking at for the purposes of drawing. First thing I'm going to do is to evaluate and mark in the furthest corner of the book. And from there, I want to drop a plumb line with my pen in the air to decide where the nearest corner comes in relation to the furthest corner. And I find it to be over here. So plumb line comes down here, nearest corner is about there. Coming back with my plumb line, I could then take a right angle to the plumb line and marking in the second corner, just sort of by eye, deciding it comes relative to the first corner about there. And then the fourth corner, I can check its position by taking a line across this way and coming down to where that fourth corner lies. And then when I join up these parallel lines, well, parallel in real life, but in the perspective of the drawing, I appear to make a shape like that, which I can double check by looking at these angles, these interior angles I was talking about earlier. The wider open angle here and here, and the more closed angle here and here. Acute, acute, obtuse, obtuse. All right. So the depth of the book, these lines here which represent the depth of the book, these are all going to stay vertical. So these lines, these parallel horizontal lines, that are the ones that appear to converge together to, often you hear vanishing points talked about, but they're very often off the picture. They're not really very useful, I find, to be able to plot. Much more useful is to be able to position corners relative to each other, so that corner and that corner being across that way in relation to the plumb line. That one was over there. This is the next one I checked. I took a line at right angles to the plumb line in order to find out where this point was, and then position the which did I do last? I can't remember which point I did anyway. It's all about checking points in relation to each other and then double checking by observing the angles in between those points. Right, look, enough drawing demonstration. I'm not going to do any more drawing demonstration. I'm carrying on using a biro, as I said, but of course the marks a biro makes are uncompromising, can't be erased. You will end up with all these workings out on the paper, which isn't a bad thing to show. It's a working drawing. It's not a pretty picture. It's all about using drawing as a training tool to train yourself to see more accurately, which will feed into your artistic practice. These drawings are for exercising your observational powers and developing those observational muscles. So, over to you. Your challenge this week. Looking forward to receiving your submissions, to which I will give you feedback, 2 feedbacks per video, if you want. You don't have to, of course, just as long as you enjoy the videos. Gives you something to think about, something to do. It's nice to think of us sort of being together in a way, doing something similar. Great to be able to compare notes with you. So happy drawing.